which means it's another week of high school football in North Georgia. Hello, everyone. Welcome into the North Georgia Sports Report podcast. Will Cooper, Art Mosley bringing it to you live here once again on a beautiful Monday evening, actually. We're changing up a little bit here. But, Art, how are you doing, my friend?
Coop, like you, I am on the road outside of Cherokee County this week. I'm doing well. Had a work trip I had to take. So, by the miracle of technology, we're able to record this so that we can get everything in. We've got had a big week. All 6 teams in the county were active last week. We've got 2 this week. So, we've got 6 reviews, 2 games to preview, and 2 interviews that I'm really looking forward to. Because we've got a lot of questions about the 2 teams that are in action this week. So why don't we go ahead and jump right in, man, to last week's reviews? And I tell you what, we'll start this. We'll just go ahead and preface the order. We'll go heavy on 5A early, review those games, and then talk about 6A. We'll save those to the end of the podcast. But man, we're going to jump right into it. Creekview getting back on the horn, a game I had a chance to witness in person as a guest PA. Public address announcer on Friday night, and got a chance to see a much improved Creekview team. Coop, I'm just going to be first out of the gate and say Mason Munn is absolutely balling. Had another interception this week, scored a rushing touchdown, was just in on a ton of plays. Hayden Hansen looked good. J.D. Russell looked good. Landon Barnes, a sophomore quarterback, looked good. I'm stealing the thunder. I want to go ahead and get your thoughts on this before I continue anymore.
No, you're all good, brother. All good. I mean, I echo those sentiments. You mentioned Barnes, 7-7 for 111 yards, 3 touchdowns. Robert Van Alstyne had a big reception there for one of those touchdowns. And then the rushing attack was something that you kind of mentioned there with Mason Munn. But I believe by my count, they had 11 different rushers who carried the ball in total for that game. Now, some of that's due to obviously at the end of the game, it's Pope. You can kind of put in a few different players, especially when you're up by as much as they were. But, this whole group, the collection of those 11, which again, I think as I have right, if my memory serves, but 38 carries, 187 yards. That's good for a 4.9 yard average. That's good any day of the week, no matter how many guys you got carrying the rock. That dog will hunt every day of the week. So I was very impressed with Creekview. As you mentioned, you were there. I'm not going to get too far into the weeds when we have an in-person person, so to speak, to tell us what happened in this game. But it was a good win for Creekview, good bounce back. Obviously, the week before was a bit of an emotionally draining one for them, playing Sprayberry, coming up short in overtime. But with this win, they do set themselves up, at least continue to be set up in the catbird seat, as they're now in a 3-way tie for first in the region. So moving to 4-1 there. But Art, tell us a little bit about what you saw a little bit more in depth there, partner.
Yeah, Coop, I'm going to tell you, I thought maybe a little bit of hangover. Pope was able to score, put the first points on the board, a little quarterback draw on a second down and medium, and nobody accounted for the quarterback for Pope. He sprints about 60 yards for the score, and I'm thinking to myself, either I'm bad luck or here we go again, or Coach O'Sullivan really had a great game plan for his Pope Greyhounds, but Creekview comes right back, was able to march down, get a score on the board. Big, to me, a turning point in the game, really, Creekview kind of battling back and forth, really working on getting that running game established. Pope tried a fake punt, and the pass kind of floated in the air and was picked off by Hayden Hansen. I think really switched some momentum for the Grizzlies, and that was even before Mason Munn's interception. So 2 first half turnovers. Pope struggles sometimes with the short kick. They struggle to really get the running game going. So a testament to Creekview's defense for really bottling that up. Pope did get a touchdown late, running back. Ivan Darden Jr. was unaccounted for out of the backfield, and Hudson Marenko, the quarterback, was able to find him. That's a young football team. Pope, they've got a senior running back in Ethan Alterman, but he split times with Darden Jr. So they will be better. I don't know if we'll see them again as the region realigns, but I tell you what, Coach Williams has his Creekview Grizzlies really running. And like I said, that's an easy game that could be a trap game. We saw Pope give Woodstock trouble the week before. And again, as they come out and score that first touchdown, I thought, man, this is going to be trouble. But as you mentioned, Robert Van Alstyne getting in the action, you see the many running backs. So, you had Travis Fines getting the carries, Carson Lott. Tell you what, senior senior running back, Aiden Grice, delivered an absolute blow, ran over one of the Pope defenders. He didn't get in the scoreboard this time, but I mean, just very physical running from all of the backs that had carries. And we mentioned Landon Barnes getting the start this week. Not quite sure what happened with Penrod, but Barnes got the start and filled in nicely. The touchdown, they had a couple touchdown passes. In that, it actually maybe 3 touchdown passes. Got a wheel route on one of them to Carson Lott. You mentioned Van Alstyne, and then leading receiver Stevens also got in the end zone as well on a pass play. So great job by Creekview, really distributing the ball around. Coach Williams doing a great job over there. His defense looking good, and Coop. I do have to. Since we're talking about Creekview, I have a bone to pick. Okay, there are some passionate fans. We have seen some extremely passionate fans at Creekview High School over the years, going way back to when I first moved to the area. And, the first football game I ever went to was a Creekview football game because it's so, the proximity to my house or whatever. The community is rallying around these guys. It's loud. There is a home field advantage here in the Grizzly Den. But I tell you what, over the past couple of years, I feel like that's gone down and down. And I do want to give a shout out to one of our listeners, Chad Stanley, and his little crew. I'm going to call them the 12th man because, and I'm biased. I'm the PA announcer, and we're trying to get the fans rallied up, and it's like golf clap. It's third down, and the student section is getting loud, and it's like you got 20% of the audience engaged and really in cheering on these guys. And I tell you what, this team from where they were at the beginning of the season, the inexperience, and they got a lot of seniors, but a lot of inexperienced players to where they are now, night and day. Coach Williams has done a great job with coaching these kids up. And for fans in the stands to be sitting on their hands is absolutely despicable. I'm calling out Creekview, with the exception of a handful. And Chad, I mean, you're one of the ones that's ringing the cowbell, man. You're fired up, and that's the passion. But I'm telling you, something has got to change for the Creekview fan base. It's so bad that the student section at halftime was trying to fire up the crowds. And again, they're just kind of like, if you wanted to go to the symphony on Friday night and not clap and just, do something boring, then go to the symphony. And no disrespect to the symphony. Go watch a movie. Why are you even the people that cheer the loudest at the Creekview game, the loudest cheer I heard were the band parents. And no disrespect to the band, much respect to the band. They add so much passion and pageantry to what it means to be on a Friday night. But I was embarrassed for the Creekview football team that the fans could not get up and cheer on this team that looked like they were dead to rights early in the season. They're now playing fantastic football, and that's embarrassing. And I had to get that off. I know you talked about it earlier. I've got a platform. Our platform is to lift up students. I think as adults, especially, you got guys busting their butts week in and week out. You ought to be cheering for them. Took a Sprayberry team the distance. Still have 2 big games left to play. I don't even know what fans are going to show up at River Ridge next week, in a week in 2 weeks when they play River Ridge. If anybody's going to show up, or who's going to show up for the Sequoyah game. I mean, it is a wine and cheese crowd, and that is not acceptable. Rant over.
I second. I've been on this rant for a little while now. You and I have kind of shared this sentiment, and I'm with you 100%. I don't know if there's a lot of, Kirby Smart claps going on, that everybody thinks that's how you clap. I don't know. But I agree, man. I mean, it's, used to your point, the Den used to be the place. And, it kind of, it, being from there and growing up in that community, it hurts not to see that anymore. And to your point, this is a football team that not only can win a region title, but they have a very easy, I don't want to say easy, but they have a very simple path to do so. Like this, we're not blowing smoke when we say this is a team that could be a region champ, and to have a game in October, have that atmosphere, it's sad, man. It really is. So I'm with you, man. I'll put my name right by yours, sign off, calling them out, show up and act like you care. And if you don't care, I guess that's for the ticket. I guess that's for the gate money.
It's just very frustrating to see.
Yeah.
I think those kids and that coaching staff deserve more.
I mean, you cannot tell how good of a job Coach Williams and that staff have done this year. And not that Art and I are the ultimate ball knowers, but we know a thing or two about a thing or two. And it would be so easy for that staff and that group to have checked out, being 0-3, and for them to rattle off the wins that they have. And to your point, the one loss that you've seen in 2 months has been to Sprayberry that you took down to the wire, and we'll get to the River Ridge part in a minute, but smoked River Ridge. That's the best you got, eh? So I'm with you, partner. I'm with you. You have my full support. If anybody gives you any smack talk, tell them that I second this, so we earn it together. But I think we need the green and the blue to show up a little bit bigger on Friday nights, especially because to your point, they got a couple of big games coming up.
And they'll be, they close the season out on Halloween against Sequoyah. I mean, leave the trick or treat candy on the front porch and show up to the football game. That's okay. Right. Like I said, rant over.
Agreed.
We're gonna move on to River Ridge, who was in action.
Do you want to talk about what Creekview has coming up?
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. Before we move, so they do. So after the break, Region 6 5A is on break this week, and after the bye week, they will go travel to River Ridge on the 24th, and then be at home to close out their season against Sequoyah. Two very pivotal, and important games in region seeding. There's a scenario. This is how important these games are and how wacky this region is, Coop. There's a scenario where Creekview, who currently sits at 4-1, and even Sequoyah and Sprayberry, all three of those teams tied. There's a scenario that one of those teams could not make the playoffs. I mean, things have to work a certain way. So for Creekview, it's a matter of taking care of business. And first thing is first, I think, is getting Penrod healthy at quarterback. And what you've proven, at least what you've proven to me, is now you've got a backup who's got 3 or 4 games of varsity experience. And you've got a starter in Penrod who's been fantastic in making plays. So you're building your bench depth, and I think that goes a long way in these last 2 football games. So I would say if Creekview is going to win a region title or be in contention for it, they've got to win out. And I think if you want to really assure a playoff game, you really need to win one of these, go 500 over these last 2 ball games. And you could probably drop these 2, but you'd need some help at that point. And really, you need Woodstock to lose a football game, but much is to be determined. I think this region, we knew it would be close, Coop, but it's a lot more up in the air than I think either of us expected.
Well, I think if you had looked at week 3 and we had told you that, Creekview was tied for the region title lead and also had a very clear path to winning the region, and be like, you guys are talking about that in mid-October? Really? It's like, yeah, we are. This is a very good team, still with a lot to be determined. As you mentioned, if they beat River Ridge and Sequoyah, they're region champs. If they beat, they would actually need help with Sprayberry regardless,
right?
Because there'd be a 3-way tie. It's a whole complicated thing. If they beat just one of them, you would rather beat River Ridge than Sequoyah, because River Ridge is already kind of on the outside looking in. River Ridge is kind of the 5th spot right now, and that would make a lot more sense for your seeding. You would be the 3rd seed in that. If Sprayberry loses another game and you win out, you're the region champ. So, for this team, there's a simple way to get there. I think for them, it's just that these are arguably their last, obviously including the Sprayberry game and then the last 2 of the season, 3 of their last 4 games are the toughest. So, that's when it's going to be the most telling for how this team really is, because they've gotten past Pope, Lassiter, Riverwood, kind of the teams that we're like, okay, So from this standpoint, it's going to be a tough stretch for the Grizzlies, but they can get it done. So there's a lot left on the table for literally everything. Because you can miss the playoffs or you can be the region champ. Everything's open, and we got 2 weeks left. So it's a heck of a time to be a Creekview fan.
Absolutely, it is. So that's our thoughts on Creekview. Coop, let's move on before I go on another tirade about the fan base over there. River Ridge, man, tough night for the Knights over at the Ridge. We actually got an update, and I did want to thank. We'd be remiss if we didn't thank Miss Jenkins for coming on the podcast again last week, who um, um, also sent us a picture of the actual name of the stadium. so
Yep.
so we'll never forget that. But I tell you what, tough night for the Knights as Sprayberry comes over, and I think some of that has to do with injury. You lose your starting quarterback, and we're not. I know Coach. If we had Coach Collins on here, he's not going to be making excuses. I think that's a key piece when you don't have a backup with experience, and Lockerman has been the guy most of the way, if not all the way, for them, and he gets injured. It just changes the complexity of that ball game, and River Ridge goes down 28-10. Coop, your thoughts on River Ridge, and then we'll talk about their playoff picture.
Yeah, it kind of was, and then it wasn't there for a while. Because I mean, we're kind of watching the end of that game. We talk about River Ridge and their special teams. Just exceptional play. They end up fumbling a punt that ends up putting Sprayberry in the catbird seat because by that point it was 14-10, and you're kind of looking at that defense. I think there's about 8 minutes left or something. You're kind of looking at River Ridge like, with you guys running the football, you might be able to get it, and it just kind of put the nail in the coffin, and Sprayberry adds another score late. And the thing that surprised me the most was when I got back to look at the box score for this game. If I told you that Micah Pugh and Camden Cox both averaged 7 yards per carry, if you had told me that, I would have said there's no way they lose this football game because it just means that one of them is going to get 20 carries, the other one's going to get 15, and keep it moving. We just ran for 300 yards. So the fact that they didn't, I think, says a lot about what changes in their play calling was like without having Lockerman in there for most of that game. It's a tough situation. It's obviously the last thing you want when you're in a position that River Ridge was, because just like we got done talking about Creekview being in a spot for a region title, River Ridge was kind of in that same conversation. Their conversations changed a whole lot because since they lost to Woodstock earlier in the year, they're kind of the fifth man, odd man out at this point, and really need to win out, but more importantly they really need to beat Creekview more than anything. So all of that being said, I like the fight that I saw from the Knights. It's always hard, homecoming, high energy. You mentioned Miss Jenkins being on the podcast, talking about how important, it was to be at the Ridge, how they were having these games, and it just didn't work out, unfortunately, for the Knights. But, hopefully they get a little, this last week of prep. Obviously, it's a bye week this week, and then, getting ready for Creekview the week after. Hopefully they can take that time to kind of figure out what they want to do, whether Lockerman's available or not, being able to figure out who they want to take the snaps and what they want that offense to look like as they try and qualify for the title.
Yes, certainly the bye week does come at a great time for the Knights. Coop, we mentioned their game against Creekview on the 24th. They'll close out the season against Lassiter, and a team that we don't spend a whole lot of time talking about, but a team who's also mathematically still, they need some help, but they still have a shot at postseason. So not out of the realm of they're not out of the woods yet. You've got a Creekview team who's playing with confidence. At least from our standpoint, we don't know the situation with your quarterback. And then you got a Lassiter team who has scored some points this year. I'll leave it at that. I think they've struggled a little bit defensively when it's come to region play, but I tell you what, they're a team that can put up some points and cause some trouble. So anything can happen. River Ridge, a team that can be in or be on the outside looking in, but I agree with you. The game they have to have is Creekview, because that's a team that's in front of them right now. And so they're not going to pass, only in order to pass Creekview, you got to win that one. You need both of them, but you really need that one.
Yeah, if you don't beat Lassiter and you beat Creekview, it becomes a nightmare scenario, especially if Creekview ends up losing, because you're going to have a whole bunch of teams that are in a tight spot. But yeah, look, that loss to Woodstock comes back to the Knights at this point, because they would be in a much better position. But Woodstock has that head-to-head, and they have the same schedule. You can decide your difficulty on this, right? Woodstock's got to play Riverwood and Sprayberry. River Ridge has Creekview and Lassiter. Which one's more difficult? Make your own assumptions. Who knows? I mean, Creekview and Sprayberry, that game was decided by 1 point in overtime.
Right.
So that's just about as even as you can get. So
Right.
either way, Knights still have plenty to play for. They need the bye week. I think it comes at a good time for them to kind of lick their wounds and figure out what they're going to do personnel-wise moving forward.
All right, Coop. Let's move on to talk about the Sequoyah Chiefs, a team that went in last week in another one of these games they had to have. They get their star running back, Will Rejecki, back. He has a big night, kind of ices the game on a long touchdown run after Woodstock continued to battle back. And they get a win, 7-point win over the Wolverines. I think we were fawning over Sequoyah early in the season because they were blowing out, teams. I know we talked about the 61-point win at Cherokee and then blowing out Kell and then blowing out Sprayberry. And we thought nobody's going to touch this team. And I don't know if it's a matter of they've come back to earth or teams have just gotten better and you got more film on these teams. So it's, the scheme and your ability to scheme really changes, or team scheming against you changes certain outcomes. But the Chiefs, again, still control their own destiny, similar to Creekview. They just have to win out. And before we talk about their playoff positioning, I want to get your thoughts on that football game on Friday night.
Yeah, it was our game of the week, man. I kept a close eye on it. From my perspective, from the Sequoyah side, before we get into the Woodstock side, it was so good to have Will Rejecki back. I think he ended up with 3 touchdowns or 2, but, one of them being a big 65-yard touchdown run you mentioned kind of iced that game away. I've mentioned this hundreds of times, but I love the stat WAR, wins above replacement, in baseball, and I wish we had it for football because, a guy like Rejecki, like, how many wins is he worth to a team? I think for Sequoyah, this is a game that they wouldn't have won without him. So I think that's kind of a dynamic that you can look at there. So that's point number one. Number two was it was good to see Maddox Waller get in the end zone, for them to open up the scoring. They found him in the end zone. So that was good to get him some receiving action because I know, we talked to Coach Jackmine earlier in the year, and, he kind of told us that their tight ends are normally
blockers,
kind of
right?
an extension of the offensive
right.
line, more than they are receiving like we see in modern day football. So I was glad to see that. I thought overall, for Sequoyah, I agree with your sentiment. It's like, what do you do with some of these results? Because they did smoke everybody they played outside of Denmark for, the first half of the season. And then we get to the second half of the season, and it's not only been a loss to River Ridge, but then, they didn't necessarily get a runaway from Lassiter, and then they certainly didn't blow out Woodstock. Now, Woodstock's a much better football team than people are giving them credit for, but still, to your point, if we had told you Woodstock would only lose this game by a touchdown back after the Cherokee game or the Kell game or the Sprayberry game, be like, what? So I don't know if it's the fact that our region is just really, really good and we're kind of seeing that, and the Sprayberry game's the outlier, or if it is that something's changed since those blowouts and that original bye week on the fall break week has kind of come back to ground them back to earth or something. I don't know. But either way, Sequoyah is still in a good spot. Again, talking about their kind of position, win out and you win the region title. You have the head-to-head over Sprayberry. You'll have to play Creekview before you wrap things up. They're the only other one-loss team. So if you win that, then you're the region champ at 9-1, and probably in the catbird seat for some really good playoff material, which we'll get into later because if this and butts were candies and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. So if you think you already beat Creekview, then that's not how this really works. So we'll see.
Yeah, I have to imagine Sequoyah is one game at a time. They wrap up their season, Coop. They'll be home against Pope for the last game of the season at Skip Pope Stadium, and then they will be on the road at the Grizzly Den on Halloween. So 2 games left in the season for the Chiefs. Everything they wanted still in front of them. That region title notwithstanding, but first is first. They got to take care of Pope, and then we'll talk about Creekview on the week of Halloween week. So again, great job for Sequoyah getting Rejecki back, and order, at least on Hickory Road, seems to have been restored.
Yep, seems like it.
Hey, let's move on. We prefaced this a little bit earlier, but or teased this a little bit earlier. Excuse me. Woodstock, on the short end of the stick, a team that battled and battled and battled and wouldn't quit, wouldn't go away, ran out of time in the ball game and fell short by 7 points to Sequoyah. Coop. They've certainly, again, a team that's not out of the playoff picture, but things got a little bit more interesting for the Wolverines. I think, as we talked about, the feather in their cap is they've got a tiebreaker against River Ridge if it comes down to that. They've got their work cut out for them. Again, I think you get another big game from Burmeister, another big game from Hubbard for the Woodstock Wolverines, but just not enough. A little too much Sequoyah last week, and they go on the road and get the victory. Woodstock loses at home, but still not out of the postseason race.
No, not by a long shot. As a matter of fact, it's not even guaranteed that they would be the not get a home playoff game. Now, it takes a little bit to get there. Before we get into that, kind of looking back at what we saw from them against, Sequoyah, Graham Burmeister, 24-34, 225 yards, 3 touchdowns, and 1 pick. Rushing attack was once again really Burmeister, just shy of 100 yards. Trace Washington had a handful of carries, not the most efficient on the ground, but got it done. But again, the thing about Woodstock to me is their fight, because they were down, and they don't go away. They just don't go away. And they don't lose by much either, by the way. I mean, if you think about, flipping one possession games, they lost to Creekview by the slimmest of margin. They just lost to Sequoyah by the slimmest of margins. Like, this would be a much different conversation at this joint. I mean, we'd be talking about undefeated Woodstock in region at least. So and flipping the Etowah result too. If you're just counting one possession games, then yeah, they would be undefeated. So they're not far off. They're a very dangerous team. That's why I say they're probably the most underrated, outside of any team that we've seen. But their path to the playoffs pretty straightforward. If they beat Sprayberry and River Ridge just doesn't win out, then they're in. That's pretty simple because they're going to have the head-to-head over Lassiter, who would be the only team that would even present them a challenge. Where things get interesting is if Woodstock beat Riverwood and Sprayberry, then they would both be tied at 5-2. The question would be if Creekview lost to Sequoyah, what would happen? Because then they would all be tied in a 5-2 loop that they would all have wins over each other. That goes to tiebreakers, would be a nightmare, but that would be your 2 through 4 seed, would depend on the tiebreaker. So that's not even a conversation of, where you line up. That's just straight up where are you in the playoffs? So there's a lot that can happen. I would say the odds for Woodstock to make the playoffs probably about 80% right now. They look like they're in a pretty good position. And if everything holds serve and they beat Riverwood and lose to Sprayberry, which is what the math would tell you is the most likely outcome, then they'll be your 4th seed like they were last year. Instead of their prize being a trip to Milton, their trip this year will be to Thomas County Central, which, they're kind of out of the frying pan into the fryer. I don't know if 2024 Milton's any worse than 2025 Thomas County Central, but either way, Woodstock's in a good position as far as playoff seeding goes. I don't worry a ton about the Wolverines making it, but definitely, I think that Sprayberry game is going to be one to circle because, based on what we've seen so far, they're not going to lose by much if they do lose.
I completely agree, Coop. And the significance, I think, of a home game, especially with the playoff matchups for Region 6 going to face Region 2, is important. You just don't. You'd rather one of those teams have to take the 3, 4, 5 hour bus ride up here than vice versa. You just have to become a road warrior at that point. And not that it can't be done. There are teams that have gone on the road in the first round of the playoffs and upset, a region champion. But I tell you what, Thomas County Central, not your average region champion. They were talking about one of the top teams in the state. And then it's really looking like Lee County is at number 2 seed down there, either Lee or Houston, one of those two. And Thomas County Central and Houston still have to play each other. So, that could change as well. But just very unfriendly confines, making those and going on a road trip on top of that. So you mentioned it. We could end up with 3, 4, 5 at 5-2, and we'll have to go to the tiebreaker to sort that out. But Woodstock, again, everything they want still in front of them as well.
Yeah, very much. I mean, I think Woodstock is in a great position. So excited to see how their bye week goes. Hopefully, they can find a few answers that they need to kind of flip those one possession games. And if they do that, then they're in a great spot.
Yes, they are. Coop, we've got 2 more games to finish out. We're going alphabetical order, finish with our game of the week. And it just happens to be that, the order is that of such. But Cherokee Warriors, man, another tough loss. Coop, they were in the game with Walton. Special teams bit them and miss a field goal, miss an extra point, give up a kickoff return for a touchdown. Really the bugaboo. 13-9 at halftime. They're down to Walton by 4 points, and then Walton scores 3 second half touchdowns to close out the scoring. They lose that game 34-9, all but eliminating Cherokee from postseason contention. Man, tough one for the Warriors. I feel like we've seen improvement, but not able to put every phase of the game together for a full 48 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same story that we've been talking about, right? It's Brandon Hamilton, again, over 100 yards. Once again, I think the only game he hasn't gone over 100, maybe the Sequoyah game and the River Ridge game. But I mean, aside from that, it's just been 100 yards, 100 yards. It's just a question of, is it 150 or this week it was 105? But just insane production off, out of the backfield for the Warriors. And then, we kind of see this with the quarterbacks. We saw both, whether, we saw Parker for a little bit, Sawyer Ray for a little bit, kind of trying to find out what they want to do there, I think, and trying to mitigate injuries as much as possible. It's not an enviable position for where the Warriors coaching staff has been. It's definitely a tough sledding for them right now. And to your point, Walton is a team that, just like many in the region, which I'll talk about Marietta in a minute, you kind of, as region play opens, we kind of circle some of these teams like they're gettable, I think. And then we get into region play and it's like it's not so much that they're gettable, it's that they played the upper echelon of who is in Georgia. And, to put it quite bluntly, Cherokee, nor Etowah, but Cherokee in this specific segment, are not prepared to have that match yet. They're still trying to figure out how to get to that level. So it's just that the teams are a little bit more battle tested, still trying to learn, still trying to fight, still trying to figure it out. But I do feel like, from what I've seen from Cherokee, I definitely don't want to gloss over the fact that, Jack Rubin's leading the classification in receiving, and Brandon Hamilton, obviously making a lot of noise here in the rushing yardage and the classification as well. So I think both those deserve the mentions and the shout outs, because they're putting in some work that, even though the results aren't showing up in the, in the record like we would like to see, they're probably arguably some of the most productive players we've seen at Cherokee in a long time.
Yeah, I mean, putting up numbers similar to things we've seen like a Darius Harshaw, Keith Adams Jr. So among the greats. But Coop, before we talk about their game, and they'll be at North Cobb, it'll be the Battle of the Warriors this week. We wanted to get Coach Holley in here to talk about the Warriors. And not just their game, but a couple other topics around Cherokee football. So I think we've got him on the line. Why don't we go ahead and bring him in?
And joining us now on the North Georgia Sports Report podcast, the head coach for the Cherokee Warriors, Coach Adam Holley. Coach, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you guys?
Hey, good, Coach. Thank you for being with us this week on a kind of a week that we're getting ready for all of the fun stuff, getting ready for the kind of the end of the season, and obviously the playoff race heats up. But from your perspective, Coach, it's been a few weeks since we've talked to you. Kind of want to get a gauge on your team, since injuries have been an issue, kind of trying to find your footing there. Can you give us an update on what your team has done over the last couple of weeks and where you feel like the group is at?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a really hard year. It's been a challenging year for everybody. I just felt like, we faced so much adversity, and it started with injuries in July. And I felt like we went into the season missing a handful of starters. And I felt like just when we got those guys back, we would lose another few starters. And we could never get healthy, from a starting standpoint, all at the same time. And I'm not making excuses. I knew that we were going to be a young team as well. And I think I even told you guys that I knew that the youth and inexperience was going to rear its head at times. And it did. But, just unfortunately, it was just one of those years. I felt like we could never get healthy at the right time. Even though our youth and inexperience was starting to grow up and play really well, I just felt like we could never get a game where we played 4 quarters, where all phases were playing and clicking together. So it is what it is. I'm not making excuses. I got to do better to put our team in a better position next year moving forward. But also, we've got 2 weeks left, and we want to finish this thing right. And we've already been preaching that hard, that for these seniors, now they've got 2 weeks of high school football left, and they'll never play high school football again. So they need to enjoy it, and they need to give it everything they got. And I love our team. They don't quit, and it showed every Friday night. The ball doesn't bounce their way, but they've never given up. They've never quit. They gave it all they had all the way through the end of every single game. So we just want to continue to see that, but also preach to our underclassmen that, hey, this is an opportunity now for you to get a jump start into where we want to move, moving forward into next year. So yeah, there's no way around it. It's been a struggle, and there's been a lot of adversity, but I'm still so proud of the guys, the way they've handled it, their character, their maturity, and then their just refusal to quit.
Coach, despite the record, you have two seniors who have had, and statistically, that have had a couple of the best stats, not just in Cherokee County, but statewide recognition, and wide receiver Jack Rubin, and then running back Brandon Hamilton. Can you talk about the legacy that those two guys in particular will leave as they have, close out their career at Cherokee over the next couple games?
Yeah, I think that they both have the opportunity. I think if they finish strong in these next 2 weeks, to kind of put their names up there with the greats that have played at Cherokee. And there's so many great receivers that have come through Cherokee, even within the last 10 years. Coach Shaw had a bunch of good receivers come through when he was here. And so I think Jack's got an opportunity to put his name up there and to be remembered for a long time. I mean, the fact that you're leading the state in 6A in receiving is a huge accomplishment for him. And just because you see guys do it, at schools like Buford and the Carrolltons and stuff like that. But for Jack to go out and do that every Friday night for us was really cool to see, and just a testament to his hard work and what got him to that point. So, and then the same thing for Brandon. I think we knew we had a really special back coming back, and I think that he played a lot last year, but split carries with really 2 or 3 senior running backs. So for him to take on that load and responsibility, and to now lead the state in rushing for 6A. So just a huge accomplishment for both. And I think that, their names will be brought up for a long time at Cherokee High School in terms of, the expectation of how to go out and compete, and the expectation to perform well on Friday night. Those two guys do it. And it's no surprise that they're the statistical leaders in their categories in the state. So, just proud of them. And that just another testament to, the record has not gone our way, and the scoreboard hasn't always gone our way, but we've got guys that go out and competing their tails off every Friday night, and it shows.
Yeah, Coach, they've been a ton of fun to watch this year. And, kind of continuing on that, you mentioned, getting their names put in with some of the greats at Cherokee, which obviously has a long and storied history. You get one more time out at Tommy Baker, not this week, but later in the year against Marietta. But from your perspective as the coach, what have you seen from the Cherokee community since they're all kind of rallying around, getting to bring back some of these, alumni from, even early on in the school's history in the 50s and 60s, all the way up to just a few years ago. But what have you seen from the community as you guys are kind of getting ready to make that transition over to the new school?
Yeah, it's been really special to see, and it's been special to be a part of this season. And I'm honored to be in a position to lead the program through this last chapter of Tommy Baker. But just to see the crowds that have come out every Friday night, and that just shows our community and the support that we have and the tradition and the history of the program. That it is what it is. Our record's not great, and we've struggled on the scoreboard. But if you come to Tommy Baker on Friday night, that the home stands are still packed out, and so it's awesome to see. And I think one thing that's become obvious, there's a lot of people that are going to miss this place, and they're going to miss Tommy Baker because they voiced it that they're happy for us, but at the same time, I think they're a little, they're a little sad that we're leaving their home and Tommy Baker, the stadium that has had decades and decades of memories and so many good stories. So, I would say both ways. I think that there's a lot of people excited, but there's a lot of people, that are sad and bittersweet, I guess, to see us move. But it's been fun to see the crowds and the generations of alumni come out every Friday night to support our guys.
Coach, one of the things we want to switch gears a little bit, and the GHSA came out since the last time we talked, and kind of revamped the way that the postseason will be determined in all the team sports over the next, I guess, at least the next 2-year cycle, and of course we'll have a new region realignment next year. That's still to be determined. That'll come out later in November, I believe. But from your perspective as a coach, kind of looking ahead a little bit, have you had a chance to digest what this new playoff structure is? And does that change the way that you guys go about scheduling coming up this off season with, I assume a new region realignment? They may, keep that classification together, but
yes, sir.
Does that change? Have you guys given thought about that? And do you have an opinion on this? And, we have an opinion, a very strong one, like how important are regions now anymore, and all that other good stuff. And I told Will, regions aren't going away. I mean, the GHSA is not going to do that. But what are your thoughts on that? Or can we get your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we have. As soon as it came out that it was final and that it was going to be in place. And what's awesome, Jeremy Adams, our athletic director, actually brought us all in for a head coaches meeting and kind of laid it all out. And so we had a pretty lengthy meeting in terms of just all the head coaches at Cherokee High School and how do we need to schedule? What does this look like? And then bouncing ideas off other coaches as well, other head coaches and coaches that are already in this format, in the lower classifications on, with this in place, how do you approach scheduling for the next year? So it's brought an interesting dynamic. One thing that I feel confident about, being in the highest classification, because we'll be in 7A, I think our region will be competitive regardless. So, we need to go out and as we're scheduling our non-region, I think we need to be absolutely cognizant and aware that, you can't just go out and schedule 3 to 4 or 5, however non-region games you have, cupcakes or easy wins that you want to go get, because at the end that might not, you're not going to be rewarded for that. So because there's all this formula of opponent winning percentage and opponent's opponent winning percentage. So there's so much that goes into it. But I think that we all feel pretty confident that our region should be competitive enough, as long as you do well and you're successful in region, that you should probably be rewarded and hopefully, I would like to say, end up in the top 32. But I think what it's done is that now, I don't think it takes away from region. I think region titles are still important and you still want to strive for that. And I think that that's always going to be there. But I think if anything, it now just means every game matters, and for always in the past history, you can kind of preach, well, those first 4 non-region games are a preseason,
Right.
you're just working out the kinks until you get to region. And then that's when it really matters. That's when the real season starts. But now that's not the case. You can't sleep through your non-region games and then, all of a sudden turn it on in week 6 and think that you're going to get in the playoffs. So I think it adds importance and value to every game, which I think is great for the competitive nature of the sport and for GHSA. But I don't know how much our region is going to change. There's a bunch of rumors of some schools coming up and some schools dropping out, but I feel pretty confident that our region, regardless, will be very competitive enough that, you go in and as long as you compete well and finish near the top in your region, that I think you should get in. Because I look at last year, I don't know if you guys saw, but they released, if this formula were in place last year in 2024, we were in. We get in the
Right.
playoffs. And so, man, I wish we would already had this in place, because and I think that we felt like we had a really good team. We knew we did. We dropped a couple really close games, and I think those are things that the computer recognizes.
Mhm.
So I would have loved for that to already been in place, but and I do think in certain ways, like take a year like us right now where we're struggling, and you never know. Like you win the last two games or the last three games of the season, and that could bump you into the top 32. So
Mhm.
I think it does. I think it adds the fact that you can't ever just think that you're out just because now there's no way in the top four in your region. You never know what's going to happen with those computer playoff rankings at the end. So I'm excited for it. I am. I think that it adds a different dynamic in terms of who you want to schedule non-region, but I do think overall it'll be good for the competitive nature of the sport.
Well, Coach, that's some really good points. I had not considered kind of the position that you guys are in this year, where you're facing North Cobb and Marietta to wrap things up.
Yeah.
And if you're in that new situation, then
Who
2 wins
knows?
against those would,
Right.
Yeah. There's no
at least make
telling
an
what.
argument.
Right. And I think close losses have a lot to do with it. I think that if you're competing well with really good playoff teams, I think that gets recognized. And then, like you said, if you go out and you all of a sudden were struggling all year, but you find a way to win the last two or three games of the season against the North Cobbs and the Waltons and the Mariettas, who knows? You could be in. But so I think there's going to be disadvantages too for sure. But I do think that it'll be a good thing moving forward.
Well, Coach, to wrap things up in this season, you got a couple of big games coming up. Obviously, this week, North Cobb coming off of a maybe surprising loss to Marietta for at least us on the outside of the region kind of looking in. But either way, North Cobb comes to town, or going to North Cobb, excuse me. But obviously a tough test against the Battle of the Warriors. But what do you see on film from North Cobb that might present some challenges for your team, and what will it take for you guys to be successful?
Yeah, they're very talented, and I think when you're at a place like North Cobb, they don't ever have to rebuild. They just reload every year, and I think they graduated a lot, and it's a different team than it was last year. And they're a lot younger this year, but golly, they're just as talented. And you look at their running back, and is one of their top in the class in the nation, and he's got offers from everybody, and he's really really good. He's tough to bring down and tough to tackle. Then you go to the quarterback and he's committed to Notre Dame, and you just keep going across the board, and he seems like the same story, different player. And then on defense, they're a lot younger, but they're very talented as well. They have a nose that is probably the best D lineman that we've seen all year, and he's got a handful of offers, probably more, and he's just a sophomore. So we know we got our hands full Friday night, and they're a very talented group, but I think that they're a beatable group. I do. Now, you're going to have to play your A game. There's no doubt about it, and you can't turn the ball over. You can't go to the red zone on offense and come empty-handed, and the defense has got to get stops, and you've got to play pretty flawless on special teams. And I'm kind of listening to things that have been our Achilles heel all season. But I think our boys can go in confident, knowing if they just lay it all on the line for each other and play for 4 quarters, who knows what happens, because they've also showed Marietta took them and Cass beat them earlier in the season as well. So, but Coach Queen does a phenomenal job, has a great program. They're very well coached, a lot of talent. But I think if we go in there and play a complete game, I wouldn't be surprised one bit if we're right there with them.
Well, Coach, you will certainly have your hands full on Friday night. And, man, I tell you what, like you mentioned, this is I don't want to say this is a team that can get got, but at this point in your region, that every game you've got to come to play. And so I don't think this is going to be any different. That game will be at Emory Sewell Stadium at North Cobb. And as you wrap up, this week will be your 9th game. And then, of course, Marietta at home on the 24th. So season winding down, but still a lot to play for, and certainly a lot to build on for next season. I know you've got 2 young quarterbacks that are coming back, and you've got a stable of young running backs that are coming back. So, certainly opportunities for you guys to get more experience, get better, and then shock the world and beat the top 2 teams in the region. And
that's right. That's right.
go out with the win. Coach, one thing I want to mention before, and I know we talk about the record. We're not where you wanted to be. And as someone who spent a little bit of time in coaching, not as much as you, but I think it gets lost on when we look at accolades of coach of the year and who's the best coach. And sometimes, I say this for me, I feel like I've had to coach my best when I've had, the record is not indicative
Absolutely.
of the
Yep.
job that you have to do as coach. So I want to recognize that for you, in just dealing with some of the injuries that you guys had to deal with, and other things that, hey, this is not, that's not indicative of who the best coach is. I mean, if you got the players that Buford got coming in or Carrollton had coming in, then it's sometimes it's easy to coach the Jimmies and the Joes
Yes, sir.
that you get to
No doubt.
hand pick. And so
No
again,
doubt.
not making excuses, but I'm just saying, like, people
Yes,
need
sir.
to honor and recognize that. And we certainly, as fans of Cherokee County football, fans of Cherokee high school football, need to recognize that. I know your staff is, you guys aren't out there on Sunday afternoon in the meetings thinking, how can we
Right.
get to the red zone and not score? I mean, I know you
Right.
guys are in there trying to
Yes, sir.
getting these kids coached up. So we appreciate that effort, Coach, and just wanted to
Yes, sir.
publicly acknowledge that. So
Yes, sir. Well, I appreciate that, Coach. Yes, sir. Yeah, we do. I think that what you said is exactly right. I think when I look back, even at my career, and really 10 years in now, is some of the best coaching jobs I was a part of were years that we struggled on the record board. But it's because a lot of times, you're outmatched and you're not as talented as other teams. So you got to coach extra harder and put them in, positions to win. And sometimes that means that, you're doing everything you can to hang with teams,
Right.
and to be in the fight, and to be in it in the fourth quarter and have an opportunity to win, and to be knocking at the doorstep. And that I do. I love our staff. Our staff does a phenomenal job, and I'm confident that we're going to get this thing turned quick, and that it's going to start showing up on the scoreboard. And it will soon, and it'll show up in the record book soon as well. But yeah, I think that, we have done, as I would like to say, as good a job as we could do to put our guys in positions to win every Friday night, and to be in it with every team that we've played so far to this point, with the exception of Sequoyah. But just to be in it every week, just a testament to our guys and our staff.
Well, Coach, we thank you for that. And thank you, as always, for joining us on the North Georgia Sports Report. We wish you the best of luck as you travel over to Ackworth, Kennesaw area on Friday night. And we're hoping you guys come back to Cherokee County with the dub on
Yes,
Friday
sir.
night.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. I appreciate it, guys.
So again, thank you to Coach Holley for joining us on the podcast. Always good to talk to Coach. Get a little bit of got to see him on camera for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here we are. Getting into the end of the season.
finally
peer pressured him in.
I was about to say, he finally felt comfortable with us. Either that, or like you said, peer pressure that the other county coaches have put on him for showing up on film week in and week out. But thank you again to Coach Holley and Coop. I think this is the one thing I hope people appreciate about all of our Cherokee County coaches. They come in here into our jungle and are not afraid to face the I don't want to say our questions are tough, but I think they try to mitigate that by, hey, look, we're not where we need to be, and they're not making excuses. And Coach Holley not wanting to make excuses. He knows where his team needs to improve, and some of the things they've done well, we touched on. We talked about Jack and Brandon, but man, some of the things that they struggle with, and especially that, he said, we got to score touchdowns in the red zone. We can't give up, big teams on special plays, and we got to get off the field on third down. And I think those things have been a bugaboo, and Coach Holley addressed them. And Coop also, had a chance to ask him about the playoffs. And I don't know if our fans understand what's coming down the pike next season, but the playoff format is changing. I know we mentioned a little bit of that last week, but it was great to get a coach's perspective about that. Coop, your thoughts on Coach Holley, and then we'll turn our attention to North Cobb.
Yeah, no, just appreciate him for joining us. I mean, to your point, we don't ask hardball questions, but we always appreciate accountability. And to your point, I don't know how much you blame on the coaching staff. Of course, every coach says it starts and ends with us, and that's always admirable to put the blame on yourself. But sometimes it's the situation. I mean, again, Cherokee's dealt with injuries. We mentioned it. Just trying to battle against Etowah, and your two quarterbacks go out in injury, and then you're stuck, right? I mean, you got the leading receiver in the classifications now playing quarterback for the last minute and a half of your football game when you could have gone in and won easily. So it's difficult to put a lot of blame on them. I think so much of it's circumstantial, and it's high school football at the end of the day. We are, working with and coaching with kids that are, 14 to 18 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And, so much can fluctuate in their lives from game to game, week to week, day to day, that it's hard for me to sit here and pound the pavement about, oh, this coach isn't any good, or, whatever. That's why we don't do that, because, who am I to sit here and judge like I know anything about, what it's like. So, but no, to appreciate him taking the time to be with us. Always appreciate Coach Holley, and looking forward to seeing what they can put out these last two games. The week coming up against this North Cobb, but in general as well. But tell me what I need to know about North Cobb, because I think you're not going to give me a whole bunch of good news.
I'm not, Coop. This is a team that wants to be physical. They want to kind of beat you up in the run game. Coach Shane Queen, Dean Queen, as he's known around Cobb County, the longest tenured head coach in Cobb County, leads the county in all-time wins. He's going to attack this Cherokee defense with a steady diet of Zach Bellew and Quavy Eccles. I don't have stats updated past week 6 for North Cobb, but Coop, those two backs have combined to go over 1,000 yards. They've got through 6 games, and that was through 6 games, 15 total touchdowns on the season. This is a North Cobb team I think is going to want to come out and seek a little measure of revenge. Last time out, they were upset by Marietta in a barn burner. They had a stranglehold on the region. Marietta, a team that's now won 4 straight games, if I'm not mistaken. That's kind of, I don't know if shock is the right word, but an interesting turn of events there. But they also feature, as Coach Holley mentioned, they've got a quarterback in Teddy Gerard, who's a junior, who's already committed to Notre Dame, who's got a really great arm when he rears back to throw the ball. 2 receivers I think you really you have to look out for is Sebastian Easley and Micah Billingsley. Billingsley has been their go-to guy in terms of receptions. He's their possession-type receiver, 31 catches and 298 yards again through 6 games. And then Sebastian Easley with 20 receptions. He's got 238 yards, a little more pop per reception. For what's interesting, Coop, for a team with a quarterback like Gerard, who's already committed to Notre Dame, they really try to establish the run. He's not out there slinging the ball. He's not a gunslinger. He's more than a game manager, but with one of the top-rated sophomore backs in the nation and Bellew for North Cobb, I think the onus is you can't really focus on shutting down the run, because I think Gerard will punish you with talented receivers like Billingsley and Easley. So I wish I had a better answer about this North Cobb team, but man, they are serious business in my opinion. I think you look at defensively, offensively. I'm sorry, they're averaging 27 points a game, so maybe not as prolific as of a team as we've seen in the past. Their defense is also allowing 22 points per game. So an opportunity, and I think that's indicative of some of these scores we've seen outside of the Walton game where North Cobb ran away from it. The other region games they've played have been close. And I think that this will be an opportunity for Cherokee to if they can find a way to be in this ball game at the end. I think they give themselves a shot. They just can't shoot themselves in the foot. We saw them get to the halftime within striking distance. They've got to get to the last 8 minutes of the ball game within striking distance, in my opinion. But Coop, I just think there's a little bit more talent on this North Cobb team than there is on this Cherokee team right now, and I think that's going to be the difference on Friday night.
Yeah, look, I mean, games aren't played on paper, thankfully. In some cases, this being one of them. But I agree with you. It's a tall order for Cherokee at this point. I think the one thing you can give to Cherokee is that they're in wounded animal mode. Nothing to lose. You got nothing to lose at this point. So go out there and play with reckless abandon. Whatever you got left in the playbook, throw it. Just go ahead and empty it out, because it's kind of the last couple of stops here on your schedule. So I agree with you. My predictor gives North Cobb a very large win in this one. Pulling it up here. It looks like we have North Cobb favored by 33 would be the
All
number on this. So, I mean, obviously, again, the game's not played on paper, but it's pretty heavily underdog for Cherokee. So hopefully they can do some crazy things, and it wouldn't be the biggest upset we've seen on the year.
I'm going with your hopefulness here, Will. I think North Cobb still wins this game by 2 scores, but I think it's a tad bit closer. I like North Cobb by 13 and maybe a little bit lower scoring ball game than anticipated.
All right, I'll live with that.
All right, Coop, we're down to our last game. It's our game of the week. The Etowah Eagles will be at home for the Walton Raiders. Coop, a team that we just talked about, got a win over Cherokee last week. Again, it was special teams that were kind of the bugaboo for the Warriors, but the Raiders looked well in every phase of the game. Coop, this is a Walton football team. Interesting. We'll talk about that in a minute. Etowah, meanwhile, had an opportunity last week against Wheeler, a team we thought they could close the gap with. But, I mean, Wheeler used a ton of running backs in that ball game and really went to the ground. Quarterback had a couple touchdown tosses, but Etowah still learning how to close out games. We've seen this. This has kind of been the storyline for the Eagles: competitive, playing hard, fighting, and just for whatever reason, just can't get it done in those crucial moments. And you talked about this early on in the season, Coop, and I'm going to give you credit for this. I want to bring this back up. It's like, it's almost like the mentality of that player has to win until they win one of these games. That's how you learn how to win it. You have to really put into practice what the coaches have been preaching. Sometimes you got to, you're in the right play. And I think luck is a residue of hard work. You're working hard. You're doing what your coaches ask. And you're in the position to make a play. And I think that's what Etowah needs right now. But came up short, 10-point loss to Wheeler. Coop, your thoughts on the ball game?
Yeah, I mean, it's learning how to win, right? I mean, I think there's tons of examples of that. I mean, if you think about the Braves' incredible run, started in 2018. They didn't win the World Series right away, and they lost, first playoff series of 2018 and they had to learn how to win, right? It takes a while to learn how to win in certain situations. Georgia, right? They went to the national title game in 2017, lost to Alabama. Okay, well, you give them a few years, they come back and they win 2 in a row because they learned how to win. The staff learns how to win. Everybody learns how to win. So I think that's where we're seeing Etowah right now. It's not that they're a bad team. I don't think they are, but I don't think they're used to winning region games. And, we got to remember, this is an Etowah team that made the jump up to 6A, the highest classification. They were in 6A before it's confusing for everyone. But either way, they're now in the highest classification, having jumped up from what was the old 6A. They're learning a lot of things about themselves at the same time. They've undergone a ton of changes over the last 2 years. Some of them by proxy of injury, some of them by proxy of coaching change. But they're learning and they're adapting. So I feel like these last 2 games are obviously against the upper echelon of the teams that we'll see in the region, but they have a real opportunity here to kind of make some headway, and if not qualifying for the playoffs, which they still can do, by the way, they can at least find a way to make some movement within their own locker room about what it takes to win a region game.
Yeah, Coop, you mentioned that, and I just want to let you know this is the generational gap between you and I. Your reference to the Braves is 2018. Mine goes back to 1990. So just for generational purposes,
well,
I wanted to bring that up because I never would have said the 2018 Braves. I would have gone way back. But anyway, you're right. The point, let's not lose the point, and you make one that's valid. Find a way. You got to find a way to win, and once you learn how to win, they'll probably get a little bit easier for the Etowah Eagles. We saw this with Woodstock last year and 2 years ago when a couple of years ago they just made strides and now are one of the top teams in that Region 5, 6-5A, excuse me. But the Eagles, Coop, they go on. They'll face Walton again, at home on Eagle Mountain. It is our game of the week, so I think we do have Coach Vavra calling in, and looking forward to a spirited conversation with Coach Vavra. Let's go to the phone right now.
And joining us now on the North Georgia Sports Report podcast, the head coach for the Etowah Eagles, Coach Brett Vavra. Coach, thank you for being back with us this week.
Guys, appreciate you having me. Appreciate it as always.
Absolutely, Coach. We always look forward to it, especially when we're getting down into the finer parts of the season here, getting down into playoff time. Obviously, kind of fighting for region seedings for that playoff run. But, Coach, kind of want to ask, since we talked to you last, you had a couple of games under your belt, specifically last week against Wheeler, a 34-24 loss for you guys. But, again, a very competitive game for you in your first year. Can you take us through what the, progress has been like for your team since we talked to you a couple weeks ago, and how you feel like things are kind of moving along here towards the end of the year?
Yeah, I mean, we're getting better every week. We're not getting the outcome that we want. Seems like we've been in a lot of really close games. Our kids play hard. They play with some grit, and we are definitely getting better. But we're struggling right now to not make the play at critical times when we need it the most. And I tell our kids always, like every play is important, absolutely. But when we get late in the game, in the third and in the fourth quarter, especially when our team needs to make a play, it seems like, we're there in position to make it, and we just aren't able to quite make it. Or on defense, we need to get a stop, and, we're just a little bit off in our fit, and we give up a first down that keeps the drive alive or keeps us from getting the ball back, or we give up a scoring play that puts the game away, which is what happened on Friday night against Wheeler. So, as a coaching staff, you evaluate that stuff every single week. I mean, the last two staff meetings on Sunday, a large portion of that has been like, okay, this is what's happening. We can identify what's happening. And of course, each scenario might be a little bit different, but why is it happening? Let's identify why it's happening, and what can we do as a coaching staff to get that to not happen. And we've got some ideas, so we started implementing some things at practice and with our scheme and with our personnel, but mainly just our practice, and our practice habits and things that we're coaching. So it's just part of I think, your growth and development, especially in a first year in a program. And so I hate to use the term that we're still young. I mean, we're 8 games in now. We're not as young as we were when we started the season, and we should be fixing some of those things. And so we're still working on it. Look, I'm disappointed in the outcome, and our kids are disappointed in the outcome, but I'm not disappointed in our team and in the fact that we do play really hard, and we're pretty young, and there's a lot to build on.
Coach, you kind of stole a little bit of my thunder, because I was going to ask you how much of that is youth. And I know you mentioned that, hey, these guys are 8 games in now, so sophomores aren't really sophomores anymore in terms of experience, and juniors and so on and so forth. But it does seem like you guys have been competitive in every ball game you've been in, which, with a young team, I think you do want to see that. But you alluded to youth. Is how much does that? I mean, I know you're not looking for excuses, but is that do you think with a team? And I don't want to look ahead next year, because you got a big game this week, and you guys still are in contention for a playoff spot. So first and foremost, let's not forget that. But has youth and not being able to close out games like that, has that been maybe one of the biggest factors, just the inexperience of some of these players?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is. And I'm not in the business of making excuses. I don't want that. That's not who I am, and that's not who I want our football team to be. But, you just look at it, I think we have 9 players on defense. Excuse me. Yeah, 9 players on defense that, are starters or, significant contributors, 9 or 11 that have never played varsity football up until this year. So, look, at some point, it's like, now you played 8 games. And so I think youth is a little bit of a part of it. There's no substitute for Friday night experience. And then also it's on us as coaches. Like I tell our kids this all the time. Like we're in this, we're all in this together, man. And you guys have got to own it and take responsibility for maybe making mental mistakes and maybe not making a play when we need to. But we're as a coaching staff, we've got to make sure we're doing everything in our power to put our kids in the best position possible. And for the most part, I think we're doing that, but it's not perfect. And there's ways that we got to get better as a coaching staff as well. And so that is another part of my, our staff meeting on Sundays. It's been a lot of talk and discussions of how we can get better as a staff and what we can do to get our kids to play faster and to execute at a higher level.
Coach, it's as we kind of look at the region, as we all expected. Marietta, who started 0-4, is now 4-4 and perfect in the region after beating North Cobb.
Yeah.
Which obviously puts kind of a wrench in what we thought was going to happen. But from your perspective, you've coached at Sprayberry for a long time and been in some of those crazy region battles that include Cherokee County teams, sometimes without them. But from your perspective and kind of making the jump to the highest classification in 6A now, do you feel like that there's like a challenge curve with that? Do you see that on the field, or do you feel like that still with it's still football, and at the end of the day, since you have a little bit of boost in enrollment, I guess we can put it, you get some more talent where you can kind of offset that? Is that something you've noticed?
I hadn't really looked at it like that. I mean, to me, this area for football doesn't matter whether you're 6A or you're 5A right now. I mean, to be honest with you, like we're in a tough region. It is. I feel like it's the SEC every single week. But you know what? I felt like that back in 5A when I was at Sprayberry and we were playing Sequoyah and River Ridge and Creekview and then you look at the playoff brackets once you get there and it's like, oh my God, there's five. I think there was in last year's state playoffs there was, because that was the first year of realignment, that there was like 4 or 5 state champions from the previous season. And so, I mean, I think 5A is really good. And there's no doubt 6A is really good. But yeah, you got to bring your best as a coach, and you got to bring your best plan every single week. And I think at the end of the day, it's about that. It's about having the best plan possible. It's about being prepared. It's about having your kids prepared. And whether we're in this region that we're in now at 6A or the previous region, the goal is always the same, and the work is the work, it doesn't ever change. So,
Coach, one of the things, I'm going to switch gears a little bit and just want to get your perspective on this. If you've even thought about it, I know you're, trying to finish out strong in the football season, the current season, but the GHSA changed the playoff format, or will change the playoff format next season and go to a power ranking structure. Is that something that you look at as favorable or unfavorable or no opinion? And we've kind of Will and I have had a discussion about, hey, what's the purpose of regions then, or having a region versus just scheduling whoever you want to schedule to make sure you get in the playoffs? Is that something that you have thought about, or you and other coaches have had some discussion about one way or the other?
Yeah, Art, I've definitely thought about it. I've already been, we're already putting some things in the works for scheduling for next year, because I've been doing this for a little while now, and if you don't get ahead of that, then you'll be left behind, and you'll be scrambling to try to find games and schedule properly. So, I have thought about it. I do have mixed feelings about it, and a part of me believes that I think the GHSA is trying to do the right thing and trying to get the best 2 teams at the end of it in the state championship, and I understand that. But I also hear what you guys. I listened to your podcast last week, and I heard what you said about why even have regions? Why not just schedule games and play ball and that, to me, I mean, that makes sense too. So I don't know. I've got mixed feelings about it. I see the good part of it, I think, and I also see the bad of it. But that's the decision they made. So now we gotta work through it. And now I do believe scheduling, though, scheduling your non-region games is you have to put a little bit more thought and maybe strategy into it, because with the rules as I understand them, um, the winning percentage criteria of your team, of your opponent's team, and then of your opponent's opponents.
Mm-hmm.
Not like you don't just want to schedule a team and for, I don't want everybody to take this the wrong way, but you might go into scheduling for a season thinking, well, if we looking at what we have coming back, we can project that we're going to be pretty good, or project that, yeah, looking at what we have coming back, we're not going to be that good. And so you might schedule based on that, and you look at teams that you maybe match up with a little bit better. And so you look at it as like, well, we want to try to get some confidence, and we want to play in a game that we know is winnable, and we got a great chance to win. But if that's how you approach it, and you schedule teams that you know you can beat or really think you have a strong chance to beat, but they're not going to win a ton of games, then that's going to affect your seedings. So there's a little bit more thought and strategy that goes into scheduling non-region games, as I understand the rules, at least.
Yeah, great insight, Coach. Absolutely. I think that's kind of the key at this point. And before we get to that whole next thing, we still got the standard seating this year, and you got 2 games coming up to kind of close things out that will be all important, because you guys can qualify with 1 win, need a little help, but 2 wins puts you in regardless. And obviously the challenge this week is against Walton, a team that may not be the Walton of old, but still a very talented football team. What have you seen from them on film this week, and what are some challenges that you think might present your team as you get ready to face them this week?
Yeah, I mean, look, they're they're a good football team. They've played some really tough competition. They're I told our kids this today in our team meeting. The one thing that Walton has that we're trying to figure out is that Walton is used to winning, and they've kind of built this brand of football where their kids expect to win because they got Walton across their chest, and they've got they've built that brand, and they've got a history of winning, and Coach Brenner has done a great job. He's a good friend of mine, and they've done a good job for a long time, and their kids expect to win. It doesn't really matter, the youth or the lack of experience they might have. They're still they step on the field, and they find ways to win. So I think you see that still in this team, even though they are a younger football team. But I think the challenge is that being part of it, and us still developing and figuring that part out. But also, like, they do a really good job on offense of just being very, very balanced. They don't, they're gonna take what you give them. And I think if you look at it, I think the data might be kind of skewed based off what we've input on our games that we got for them. But right now they're like 60-40 run pass. But really, if you take some of that data out from one of the games that didn't really matter a whole lot, they're right down the middle, like 55, 55 or 50-50. And so that's a challenge. They've got the good quarterback he's a young kid, but he's learning, he's developing. He's a pretty good player. He's a good athlete. He's a dual threat kid. And I believe his younger brother is the receiver number 1. He's a playmaker. So they've got good players. Their 3 running backs that they use are pretty good. And the good thing for us is we've seen a lot of good backs this year. So I feel like we're going to be prepared, but they're good up front on the offensive line. They're very well coached. They're very disciplined. Defensively, they're very physical. They're big. And, that's something that we've kind of struggled with handling, is the lines of scrimmages here, because we're not quite as big. We're not quite as experienced. And so that's the challenge for us, is, being able to slow them down up front and get stops and get off the field on 3rd down. And then, it's been kind of the ongoing struggle with us offensively, is just finding a way to establish the run game. Last week I don't even think we were 100 yards on the ground, and Zeke had a first play of the game goes like 65 yards or something like that, 60 yards, and got a big chunk of that. So we're still working through those issues in our run game, and trying to figure out ways to be more efficient. But they're a good football team, but we've got a good plan, and I'm excited for the challenge.
Well, Coach, we always appreciate your candor and thank you for joining us. And as you mentioned, a couple of your comments. One, this is definitely a black and blue region in terms of the physicality, and like you said, mentioned so many great running backs, and you've got a great, a few great offensive weapons of your own there, and Zeke and Walker and then Brady also at receiver. We wish you the best of luck, and we love to see one of our Cherokee County teams. And right now, it looks like you're holding the banner for 6A here with an opportunity against a very good Walton team. You guys will be at home this weekend, if I am correct.
Yes, sir. Yep.
At Eagle Mountain Senior Night. So, hey, we'd love to see seniors out on the win. And Will, and I'll say this to you too, Coach, and I believe this. I think it just takes one of these games to win, to kind of just get the switch to flip on some of these younger guys on understanding what it takes. And we're pulling for you, and we hope it's this week against the Raiders.
Yes, sir. I appreciate that very much, Art. Yeah, we're going to work. We're going to work to get it done.
Absolutely, Coach. Thank you so much again for joining us, and best of luck on Friday night.
Thanks a lot, guys. I appreciate it. Y'all have a great night.
So again, thank you to Coach Vavra for joining us on the podcast once again. Good to talk with him and, kind of get his, we doubled up on the playoff seeding question, but
had to.
We got some strong opinions around here, so at least about that. So, it's good to get the coach's perspective because, again, I'll defer to them. They know more about it than I do in terms of how it impacts their teams. So, we'll see the strategy played out. But, getting back to this week, playing a Walton team that, coming off the win against Cherokee, this would be a game that if Etowah wins, it would, again, they're not eliminated from the playoffs yet, and a win against Walton would do them a lot of favors, depending on what happens elsewhere in the region. But this would be a big win for Etowah in terms of playoff and also for the locker room, I think.
Yeah, it would be huge, Coop, and it's a game that I think they can win. Look, Walton is a team that right now they're averaging 28 points a game, but 26 points a game, but their defense is allowing 28, so they have a propensity to give up some points. They've got a young quarterback, a young man, if I'm not mistaken, who was at North Cobb last season, but transfers over to Walton in Kriston Peacock. He's thrown for 1,376 yards. It's a Peacock to Peacock connection. His younger brother caught 42 passes for 541 yards, leads the Raiders, but they're really looking to get the ball, to get things done on the ground. Coop, 1,657 total team rushing yards. Noriega Thompson is the name that you're going to want to be familiar with, 702 yards, 5 touchdowns on the season. We mentioned Peacock, the quarterback. He's also got 465 yards on the ground, also has 5 touchdowns. But then you flip the script to their defense. I know we mentioned they're giving up 28 or whatever points a game, but Noah Loveley has been a tackling machine. 63 solo tackles, 107 total tackles. He's going to be the man that's going to be responsible for keeping and spying on on Zeke Douglas at quarterback. So I think you've got to be able to stop the run if you're Etowah. The pass, I think, is secondary to their ground game and maybe a little bit different kind of plan of attack for Coach Bruner that we've seen from Walton historically. But I love the way that Coach Vavra outlined, hey, this is a team that Walton, when he feels like when they put that Walton Raider jersey on, Walton equates winning, and they expect to win. And I think whether or not you've got, and I think it helps when you got guys like Loveley at linebacker, at one of your team leaders, knowing what it's taken. They've been to the big stage before. And I tell you what, it's going to be tough to overcome that team that comes in here and expects to win. And I think Etowah is still trying to figure out how to win. Walton's coming to this game saying not necessarily that they've taken Etowah for granted, but they know what it's going to take to get the victory. And I think it's going to be that part. It wants Etowah, and this is the Walton team they can do it against. I just think Walton maybe a couple more pieces and have been a little bit more consistent throwing the football. And they're while Peacock certainly has shown a propensity to scramble, he's got a proven back in the backfield that Etowah's still trying to develop right now, and I think that's going to make it tough for Etowah to get past Walton on senior night.
Yeah, I agree with you. Our predictor makes it close. Likes Walton by 2.
Wow.
Would be the spread on this one. So it might buckle up for a tight game if the predictor holds true. Which, by the way, it's batting 84% on the year. Just want to point that out. Not bad.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good. Coop, I'm not right there at the 2 points, but I do think this is a one possession ball game. I think it's a close game. I think Walton wins this one by 6, but I think they're not running away with this one this week.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think it'll be closer contested than a lot of people may think across the state. Math certainly backs that up, so should be a good one. And again, our game of the week. So hopefully the Eagles can come out with a win. If nothing else, hopefully we can give them the good luck charm. If we even have that, I don't think we do.
Well, if we could, we would. I tell you that much, especially in these out of county games. Coop, let's move on as we kind of wrap up the podcast for the week. There's one thing we do have to discuss. Is the power rankings. We got power rankings last week from our special guests, and one of the comments they made, and each of them made, was like, "Hey, this is a lot harder than I thought to rank these 6 teams." And so, not that we're going to pat each other on the back, but I tell you what, these our teams don't make it easy on us because they win, lose, and so I'm going to go ahead and defer to you. Number 6, we'll go ping pong here, but you go first at number 6.
Yeah, Cherokee. It's where they've stayed. Again, just haven't won much. Not a talent thing. I think it's just where they're lined up right now. So Cherokee number 6.
Cherokee at number 6. Coop, I'm right there with you at number 6, and at number 5. Then no, not extra commentary needed. I think I've got the Etowah Eagles at number 5.
Yeah, same. I think they're continuing to improve, but I think the gap from 5 to 4 is quite significant. Kind of it's like a aberration that they beat Woodstock to start the year. Like that's a game that seems so far in the rear view. But either way, Etowah still at 5 for me. Could potentially make a jump. I mean, got some big games coming up, so it's not that they're going to be locked in at 5 at the end of the year.
Yeah, and of course, Etowah and Cherokee not playing county teams anymore, but still with big games that could influence how we see them in the county. Coop, I'll go ahead and give you number 4. Who you got? You're going to tell me River Ridge? Is that what you're going to tell me, Coop?
I think it has to be Woodstock still. But man, it's close. 3 and 4 are close, and 2 and 1 are close. I think the gap between 3 and 4 and 2 and 1 are kind of widening a little bit. But yeah, I'll keep Woodstock at 4.
Interesting, Coop, because it's almost like you and I were thinking telepathically here. I've got Woodstock at number 4 also. I know they do have the win over River Ridge earlier in the season, and they played Sequoyah tough. And I would think that the perceived gap that we have between 1 and the rest of the 6, I think that maybe 1 through 4 might be a little bit wider gap than 5 and 6. But I think 1 through 4 is getting really tight, and it's really tough to start ranking these teams, especially with some of the results that we've seen. But I've also got Woodstock at number 4. I'll take my number 3, and that's going to be the River Ridge Knights.
Yeah, same. I was disappointed by the result of Sprayberry. Obviously, there are external factors or extenuating circumstances for why that game was the score that it was and ended up the way it was. I would I would bet they would like to line it up again and have Hunter Lockerman in for the whole game, but that's not the reality of the situation. So River Ridge moves back down to 3 for me, which I had them a month ago. I should have just kept them there, but I didn't learn anything. So River Ridge at 3.
Yeah, and Coop, that was my number 1 team for the last 2 weeks, and the mighty have fallen. So I'll take all the hate mail from the River Ridge Knight Nation. I know you beat Sequoyah. I know also Woodstock has a bone to pick with me because Woodstock beat you. So the commutative property doesn't work, like you said before, Coop. Number 2, I think it's your turn.
Yeah, number two, I'm going to go Creekview. Again, where I had them 3 weeks ago, should have just kept them there instead of bumping them below River Ridge, especially since, the overtime loss to Sprayberry looks like a heck of a game. Yeah, look, I mean, Creekview's getting what they need to get done. They got a lot to prove. I mean, they probably have the most difficult schedule for their last 2 weeks as anybody else in the region does. So, but for where they're at right now, that's your one region loss is to 1 point to Sprayberry. Okay, yeah, I mean, you're number two in the county to me.
Yeah, I have that same sentiment. Creekview at number two. When you look across, the roster, and they have some guys, but I think again the turnaround from going 0-3 to now sitting at 4-4 is pretty impressive. And you mentioned the 1 point loss to Sprayberry, and I realize Sprayberry's not in the county, but I think we do have to take that into to impact here effect. Number two and number three will be facing off against each other on the 24th. So we'll certainly see, where those teams line up and where they stand. But for now, Creekview at number two, which leaves no surprises. At Sequoyah is back at at least for me, back at number one, and for you at number one, where they've been from day one, the Sequoyah Chiefs, and again able to hold off a Woodstock team that doesn't quit, won't quit, and didn't quit on Friday night, and Sequoyah kind of restores order in their house, and they get a win. Coop maintain their tie in region standings, and for now, in my opinion, with Rejecki healthy, certainly one of the best teams, not only in the county but in North Central Georgia.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's really when you get to the last 3 weeks of the season, it's do or die time, and it's cute to have the fluctuations in September that you do. But the reality is these teams that are upper echelon solidify themselves in October. It's what we've seen with Sequoyah, right? I mean, obviously the River Ridge game for them is kind of like the, what were we doing here kind of question, but outside of that, they've been really good, and I'm certainly not going to move them off of number one for beating Woodstock, because I think Woodstock's a very talented team. So it's tight. It's a good bunch, but yeah, that's once again, you should just listen to me next time.
Wow. I knew that was coming. How did I know that was coming?
I took so much heat last week. I deserve to be able to throw some back somewhere.
You should. I mean,
nobody got on you.
Because I'm more like a politician, Coop.
That's true.
I give the people what they want. True. I give the people what they want, or tell them what they want to hear.
That's true. It's true. Full of lies. Your power ranking is full of what have you done for me lately in lies. Mine's full of cold, hard truth, statistics, and football logic.
Don't you know that people don't want the truth, Coop? Have you not learned that? Have you not learned?
After last week, I have learned.
You are going to draw the ire of one of our fans again if you keep. We're going to stop right now, and I want to know. Speaking of listening to you, Coop, I want to know what's been going on Friday Night Lights on Preston. I know you were out at the Salina homecoming game in Texas. What's been going on out there, Coop, and what do we have to look forward to this week?
Yeah, man, Salina, heck of a ball game last week. Took on Sulphur Springs, who was ranked 4th in 4A Division I. Sulphur came to town, really probably posed the biggest challenge to Salina that they'll see for the rest of the year. And unfortunately for Sulphur, their starting quarterback, I don't know if it was an ACL, but he's done for the year, right, almost first play of the game, actually. Sulphur, as good as they've been, just couldn't overcome it. And kind of like River Ridge, kind of like, you just can't overcome some things sometimes.
Certainly.
And that young man was definitely the engine for that team to drive. So Salina won a big game. It's 31-7 was the final, or 38-14. I'm sorry. There was a touchdown and a pick six at the end, both ways. So 38-14 win for Salina. They moved to 6-0. I don't see another team that'll probably be competitive with them, but crazier things have happened. Prosper continues to look really good. Gunner continues to look pretty good. They had a little scare to start against Beals last week. Kind of in 3A, again, smaller school, kind of rolling, but they're doing pretty well. This week, looking at a few different games, Lebanon Trail down in Frisco is going to take on Centennial. That's a big matchup in 5A down there in that region. That could be a good one. They're playing at the Star, which is the Cowboys practice facility. It is used by Frisco ISD Inside School District for some of their games. So we may take a trip down to the Star and see the Cowboys practice facility. So y'all pray for me if we do. But things are lining up pretty well, man. I mean, Prosper is making a lot of waves. Their biggest challenge is yet to come. They'll have to face Allen at the end of the year, which is the school of 6A. You could say kind of the cream of the crop. The Buford of the world in Texas is kind of Allen, along with North Crowley and Duncanville and some of these, teams that do put out some tremendous talent. But that was going to be the big challenge for Prosper. And then Gunner and Salina both, kind of further north. I think they're both cruising to region titles. Once again, for Gunner, it's going to be the 8th in a row or something. And for Salina, it's going to be like the 5th. So just kind of powerhouse programs rolling through right now. But we'll be out this week. We'll be down at the Star, seeing what Lebanon Trail's got in store for us in the 5A matchups. But it's been a lot of fun, man. Homecoming is crazy here. They close school. It's like a holiday. Businesses are closed. We went down to Main Street, 10 a.m. parade. It's faith, family, and football down there. And it's cool to see. And then at the homecoming, they set a new record. There were 7,500 people in attendance. That was the new record attendance. And then they had paratroopers jump out of a plane and deliver the Texas and United States flag onto the field. So
how cool is that?
Even for me, that's like that is some next level stuff. I've never seen that in a high school football game. So it's pretty cool, but it's a cool atmosphere. But everybody's looking pretty good. So excited to see how the season kind of wraps up, because they're 2 weeks behind us in Georgia. So we, in Texas, we got a little ways to go before we were done, but been good.
All right. Well, Coop, I won't ask for a weather check. We feel like we're on good terms right now, you and I. So I'm not gonna leave it at that. That's gonna wrap up our show for this week. Thanks for everyone who listens week in and week out. Whether you're listening in from Canton all the way down to Woodstock and to Ball Ground or places worldwide, we certainly do appreciate you tuning in to listen to the North Georgia Sports Report podcast. We certainly want to thank both of our guest coaches, Coach Holley from Cherokee and Coach Vavra from Etowah, for joining us. And again, always coming to answer the bell. And we do appreciate that. That helps make our program is what it is. And 2 games tonight, this week in Cherokee County, you can either travel down to North Cobb or head over to Eagle Mountain to Etowah. But I think it's going to be a great opportunity to get out, great weather, and 2 teams that are still fighting with pride, and one certainly fighting for a playoff spot. So get out and support these young men. And don't let me have to, give you the Creekview treatment that I had to give earlier today. And I'm not going to let that rest, Coop, until something is done about that over on Ornstead Road. But in any event, that's another topic for another day. We appreciate you all joining us. For Will Cooper, I have been Art Mosley. We look forward to seeing you all next week on the North Georgia Sports Report. Have a great week, everybody.